Hi there, and welcome back to the Fuse Show. Today I'm joined by Shreesha Ramdas. He's the SVP and GM at Medallia-Strikedeck. Previously, he was the CEO and co-founder of StrikeDeck before they merged into Medallia-Strikedeck. They are a customer success automation company. Before that company, he was the GM of Marketing Cloud at CallidusCloud, a co-founder at LeadFormix, which was acquired by CallidusCloud, and also at OuterJoin and a general manager at Yodlee. And before that, he's led teams in sales and marketing at Catalytic Software, MW2 Consulting, and Tata. He's also active in the startup community as an advisor and investor. Thank you for joining us on the show.
Thanks, David. Thanks for the opportunity. Great to be here and wonderful talking to you.
So, how did you go from spending a lot of time in the world of corporate and then also spending a lot of time in the world of startups? What was the transition like for you, and did you always know you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've been in the startup world for a long time now. Um, the transition, how it happened first time was I got exposed to a startup early on, and then I just felt that the energy in a startup was infectious.
Hmm.
And then I became a part of startup, and that's where I felt like this is where I belonged. And Also the transition, the way it happened was it started with saying maybe I'm not capable of generating an idea, but I'll work hard and I'll support other entrepreneurs' idea. And then slowly it transitioned to, hey, I can contribute a little bit to the idea itself.
Hmm.
And then it changed to, hey, I can come up with an idea by itself. So that's how it evolved. I always believe that you're a product of the exposure that you get. And
Hmm.
fortunately, I came to Silicon Valley um, early, towards the end of 90s, and I got exposed to the ways of working of the Valley. And as Valley stands for a lot of entrepreneurial stuff, and so I got pulled into it. I got sucked into it.
How'd you make that first jump to join that first startup in your career?
Yeah, so when I joined the startup, I did not view that as a startup. I viewed that
I see.
as a job, right? And,
Okay.
and it was a well-funded startup. Went in and was trying to do my job. I did not at that time. I did not distinguish between a startup and a big corporate.
Okay.
And and then the realization hit home is that startups operate differently, right? And that's where that whole energy thing came about, and you just felt, and I just felt I belonged here.
So I think I know what you're talking about, and I think I'm confident you know what you're talking about. But for the sake of our guests, could you elaborate on what that energy feels like? Like put it into more words so people who have not yet experienced it can understand.
Yeah, actually, I'll present a contrasting pictures between a large corporate and a startup. That'll hit home. So, in a corporate structure where I used to work before I jumped into the startup bandwagon was very structured process. Next day what you're working, what you're going to work about, and then everything was a process-driven culture, right? Um, and you were just looking at the siloed operations that you belong to. Now, that compared to a startup uh, culture, it's about a lot of chaos. It's unstructured environment. You never know what's going to be coming your way the next day or the next hour, right? And you go through a lot of ups and downs. I remember a lot of times I would be driving to San Francisco, and in that time I'm taking calls, and one call would be about a legal issue that needs to get resolved, and the next call would be about solving a product issue. The third would be a customer issue,
Hmm.
and then it's about sales process, right? So in that 1 hour, you've got so many ups and downs there itself, right? And so that is possible only in a fast moving startup, right? Versus corporate, it's, as I said, you know what you're going to do in the next hour. You know what you're going to do next day. You know what you're going to do next week, next month also sometimes, right? So it's very planned. It's process-driven culture, a lot of structure there, and there are a lot of people who are at ease in such an environment. And I was no different. But then when I understood how startups work, it's chaotic, but then the energy is tremendous. For me now, startup, it's like playing a video game. The adrenaline rush that I feel, um, it's similar to how a kid feels when they are playing a video game, right? You are running and you stumble, you fall, you get up, you walk, and there's next challenge that's awaiting you. Then you move on to that.
Okay. And did it take a while for that startup energy to infect you, or was it like pretty instantaneous when you first experienced it?
Yeah, it was pretty instantaneous, I would say. Uh, the question that I had initially was that, you know, do I belong here, right? I like it. I like the culture. I like the fast-paced movement here. I like the velocity, but do I belong here? Can I contribute? Can I make an impact, or will I slow down the team? Right? So those were the questions, those were the doubts that I had at that time. But then slowly you felt, confident as things progressed, and it transitioned to, as I said, like I not only belong to this environment, but I can make valuable contribution. I can make a high impact.
Is there a set of questions that you'd recommend someone to think through if they've never been in a startup and are considering it?
Yeah, it's the main thing is, are you a structured or not a structured person? That at a
Okay.
high level is very important because I've seen a lot of employees, they feel like they have the energy, but when they come to a startup, they see the chaotic environment, they see people wearing multiple hats, um, and just that unstructured is unnerving for them, right? And so that's where you have to make the call. You have to figure out that, do you need every day to be planned and prepared, or can you show up in an office unprepared, unplanned, and embrace anything that comes your way?
So first time you joined a startup, you were just thinking about it as like a work scenario as an employee. From there, you had the opportunity to pursue, I guess, a earlier stage of startup. Could you talk about the differences that you experienced and call it your day to day?
Yeah, so I would say, when you start a new company, then there's a leadership aspect, there's day-to-day working aspect to it, right? From the day-to-day perspective, I feel like every startup employee needs to be proactive in their mindset. They have to make things happen. Things will not automatically happen, right? That's, as an employee, you just need to have that mindset, right? That I'm going to make things happen here. I'm going to be that change agent here. I'm not going to wait other people to do stuff for me, or other people to change things, or other people to give me instructions that I can take and run with it. Instead, I'll be the one who will transform, right, in whatever things I'm doing. From the leadership perspective, you have to understand the difference between leading and managing, right? As a manager, you're managing things. As a leader, um, you're leading the charge. You're basically, you have started this movement, right? And so you have to um, take that on head on, and show to your team how it has got to be done, right? You have to not only be a problem solver, you have to be a visionary, because as a startup leader, you are in the hot seat where you have to think about the landscape, how it's going to evolve. You have to be futuristic. You have to define the product roadmap and all of that comes along with it, right? So that's how I view the taking the charge in a startup means.
To dive into the specifics, I guess specifically at your time at StrikeDeck, call it from there. I think what you started in 2015, is that right? 2016? Okay,
That's right.
2015.
That's right.
Um, how did you know this is what you wanted to build? Because this, I believe, this is the first time you're like, okay, this is mostly my idea, and I'm ready to build something, as opposed to being a follower and helping someone build. Is that right?
Right, right. So um, a lot of it that I started in Strike Deck, it came again from the experiences that I've had before and the exposure that I've had. As I said before, you're a product of the exposure that you get. So before Strike Deck, I did a startup that was about marketing automation, and it was about uh, taking a lead and converting them to a customer, right? And so once I came out of that and I wanted to do a new startup, I was thinking about what problem to go after. I felt, why don't I continue in that customer journey? Where once you have a customer, how can you then transition them to a successful customer? How can you help the customer realize their outcome? And this seemed a massive problem because what I saw was that there was a contradiction between the markets and what transpired in board
I see.
meetings. In board meetings, quarter after quarter, the focus was on new logo acquisition, whereas the public markets, you can see the best performing companies were the ones who had net retention rate of over 130% and who were doing a terrific job in increasing revenue from their existing customers, right? Who were doing a phenomenal work on the expansion front, land and expansion front, right? And so I saw um, that contradiction, and I felt, a platform that will help to institutionalize some amount of customer focus, rigor, customer rigor, as well as systemize the whole process of customer engagement, right? And customer prioritization. That'll go a long way. And so that was the genesis of how Strike Deck came about. Um, and also, I like to play in spaces where the platform is a system of record. I feel that in generally, when you're starting a company, you don't get that many chances to be system of record. And what I mean by system of record is where your users are in the platform every day and their entire day-to-day action is getting recorded in that system. So take CRM as an
Right.
example. That's where a lot of the salespeople perform their day-to-day activities. Take marketing automation, where the marketers run all their campaigns in that platform. So they are there every day, every hour. And in customer success, I felt that was not the case, right? There was no platform right there. A lot of the CS people either lived in spreadsheet or in CRM, right? And CRM, the central object is new opportunity. It's not central object is not customer.
Right.
And that's where I felt a need of a platform where the central object is customer and it's designed for customer success people to excel in their day-to-day life.
So the feature set of the MVP, was it defined purely based on what you wished you wanted for customers in their journey, or did you go through a lot of interviews as well?
Yeah, so uh, you raise a good point, David. MVP is something that's that's a topic that's dear to my heart because I am a big believer in this whole process of figuring out the product market fit. And so, um, in terms of MVP, the way we went about was a very structured process in some ways. We interviewed over 500 customer success practitioners, um,
You
and
personally,
yes,
500
I and my
interviews.
co-founder. Yeah,
Shoot.
I and my co-founder.
Okay.
And then we asked them uh, a lot of open-ended questions, right? So that's the methodology that we leveraged. And once we went through those 500 interviews, we saw a pattern begin to emerge. right? And those patterns where, we want something to be implemented quickly. We wanted all the data to come and proactively guide us where we should be spending time, which customer we should be prioritizing. We should not go after the customers who are shouting the most. We need to go and help the customers who need the help most, right? And so, as those patterns begin to emerge, we were able to slowly figure out roughly the MVP we should go. And so, what we then decided is to go and recruit some of the forward thinking companies as early design partners. So we had about 5 customers who expressed desire um, to be leading thinkers in the space, to co-design with us, and provide thought leadership. And then we started working with those 5 companies to design what I call as the release 0.1, right? Which is, uh, you basically have a framework in place and then you iterate over that. And that's how we went about it, David. Does that make sense?
Was 0.1 public or was it private just for those, I guess, initial batch of users?
Yeah, the 0.1 was just for those 5 customers. That's after that we started showing it to others, and then as we became confident that this is resonating, the core set of features is what most of the prospects or customers want. Um, that's when once the confidence was there, that's when we did a release 1.0 and we announced to the market that we are live now and we can be used.
So, what was the time delta between idea, like the origination of the idea, to MVP, and from MVP to public launch?
Yeah, so the time from uh, the idea to the release 1.0, I would say, was about a year and a half, and the time between MVP to release 1.0 was about 10 months.
Okay. Do you feel like that was longer than you anticipated, or was it shorter, or did it meet your expectations?
Yeah, so I'll tell you this, almost every founder is an impatient person. And a founder also is a feature holic. I say this is a disease that every entrepreneur has. You go to bed thinking about a feature, and next day morning you want that feature to be done, right? And I always advise all the founders and entrepreneurs that do not be feature holic. Do not think about the feature. Every feature that you would want to have, you have to validate it, verify it, and you should not listen to all the customer feedbacks, because sometimes customer can make demands that are not in the right direction and they may take you down a wrong path. So there needs to be a balance there. To answer your original question, um, I was also impatient. I wanted it to be done faster, always set audacious goals, and later improvise depending on the circumstances and scenario. So I would have liked to be done faster, launch the product faster, but I'm happy that we took our own time to make the release and basically put out a platform that we knew would be valuable to customers, and not something that we just dreamt of in the night and got it done in the morning.
So, when you use the noun we, who is we at this time at the pre MVP stage?
Yeah, so we were 2 co-founders at StrikeDeck. So we were the guys who were hustling to get the product out, initial set of product out. So I'm referring to us. Yeah,
Gotcha.
the
Okay.
co-founders.
And when did you hire employee number one?
Yeah, so we hired employee number one by the third month. We essentially wanted to have an engineering team, a small engineering team who could iterate with us as we um, co-design the product with our customers. because I always feel that when the customers are shown something visually, they could react much better. And if we can give customers something where they can go hands-on, even better feedback will come out of that whole exercise. So that's why we decided, and we were bootstrapping the whole journey, the initial journey. And so we decided to put together a small 5 people engineering team where we could build features and code pretty quickly. And we had this one assumption, David, that I'm glad that we assumed or we took that on, which is that at some point in time, some of the features that we build as prototype to show to the customer, we may need to throw it away, uh, afterwards, right? Because we discover that that's a feature that only one customer has a need, and then other customers may not need it, and so we'll have to make a tough call. But upfront, we wanted to build all those features um, to make the customer who was co-designing with us really happy.
So, out of those 500 people that you've interviewed with your co-founder, what's the percentage of them that needs to request a feature for it to get into the scope of the MVP?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer of this rule that a lot of the growth hackers have talked about, which is 40% is the magic number,
Okay.
where if 40% of your people are talking about one feature, then the chances are very high that that's a feature that will be liked by rest of the community. So that is one. The other is Pareto's principle, which is 80-20, is also important that of the features that you build, figure out which are the ones, 20% of those, the ones that will have 80% of the impact. And that also correlates to, my thinking about aha moment. When a customer starts using the product, which is a feature that will get him or her to the first aha moment or to the first value moment, and then which are the features that will get them to subsequent aha moments. That's how I think about the product and to answer your question.
So, when you're going into a planning meeting and let's call it you're planning for the next 3 to 6 months, how do you rank those in terms of priority? Like, I recognize the fact that there's like the 80-20 principle, but do you go through every potential feature request and discern this is low hanging fruit or this is a lot of effort, but it's totally worth it? What's your philosophy when it comes to product planning?
Yeah, so when it comes to planning the product, the impact that a feature has is very, very important for us when we are planning the product. So by the impact, what I mean is, a simple way of ranking is high, medium, and low, and then you go after the features that have high impact, and you can get um, sophisticated in terms of how you quantify the impact by asking the customers what are the outcomes that they are striving for. And once you have captured those outcomes, you figure out whether this feature will help in customer progressing towards that outcome. And if that is the case, then they rank very high, right? If the if the feature is not making a direct contribution to the outcome, then it becomes nice to have, right? So those are some of the thoughts that we had when we were going through the product planning exercise.
So, when you were at, so let's say the public release is 1.0, what version would you like loosely call it today?
Oh, we have come a long way, David, because it's been now 6 years since we got started. So we have had multiple releases after that, and uh, we also got acquired by Medallia in 2019, and so we have embraced all the wonderful work they have done in terms of bringing the best-in-class UI apps. We call it internally Alchemy framework. So really proud about the release that we put out last year, which embraced that Alchemy framework, and and we have best-in-class UI in the product now.
So how did you, what are some of the major milestones between 1.0 and where you are today in terms of both your journey personally or the feature set? What are some of your aha moments as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so the first aha moment is when we discovered what will enable stickiness with our customer base. That is super important when you're designing the product. Because if the stickiness is not there, then your product can be replaced by a competitor's product easily, right? And the way I think about stickiness is when your users start thinking that they cannot live without the product, right? When they have all the processes designed around your product, that's when it's super sticky. Now, you cannot reach that milestone quickly. It'll take a long time to get to that milestone. But what you have to do is to plan steps towards it, right? For example, if all your data is loaded and then new data gets created in the platform, now it's not easy to replace your platform because the user will feel like all my data, all my other templates that I've created is in this platform. And transitioning to another platform will take me long time, right? And so there's a hesitancy to change the platform in that case.
So if a user requested an export feature, it wouldn't happen.
Yeah, so export feature, if these days actually it has become mandatory, David,
I see.
because people want to take data out of the system and put it to other systems. And either they do through API integration or they ask for a CSV export file. So
Okay.
I feel like it's beyond your control now.
So what are the things you've learned in the realm of either growth hacking or stickiness that you've built into the product, and how do you learn those things?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer of growth hacking, and I'm also a big believer in product-led growth. Um, and those are the two terms that have gone mainstream, recently, relative to the other concepts. And product-led growth is again a concept that is near to me now in recent years, which is how do you ensure that every user um, feels equipped to use a product? How does a user get access to the product in first place, right? And there, some of the concepts or principles that I've learned over the time is, uh, you know, um, go and talk to the end users as much as possible, right? And one of the examples I have that I share with others is you look at um, Zoom, right, as a conferencing platform. They were able to figure out that it's 45 minutes is a magic number that any free user would like to use, and it's not 30 minutes, it's not 1 hour, right? It's
Right.
45 minutes, and they were able to figure that by talking to as many users as possible, right? And so um, one of the fundamental concepts of growth hacking or product-led growth is enable access to users, enable users to get the feel of the product by going into the product itself. So that could be through free trial, it could be through freemium, it could be even a sandbox with test data loaded into it, right? And so once they have hands-on access to it, they feel the aha moment, right? That they could do things in the product that they were not able to do before, then the buying process becomes easy, right? And so that just thinking about free trial, freemium, that itself was one thing that came to me over a period of time. It was not there initially, right? It was all about the product, but then you start thinking while you're developing the product, you have to think about, okay, can I configure a free instance of this easily? Can I enable data upload into the system easily, right? Without somebody being a customer first. So that's an important thing. The second thing is how do you enable collaboration inside the product, right? Because a platform becomes really powerful when you can do more things with other users, right? Um, and so, can you access a document together with another person? Can you update the document with another person? Can you update a task with another person? Can you assign a task with other person? So that has higher value than even figuring out the activities that a user can do individually. So that again, thinking was a thing that I acquired over a period of time. It didn't come naturally to me, right? So those are some of the concepts, David.
Do you have how did you learn these things along the journey? Did you like talk to other founders? Did you identify features in other softwares that you've used, or did you read books, go through accelerator programs? What was your path in terms of what do you think is the most efficient way for you to learn?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of learning from people than a browser. So when I talk to people about their experiences, it hits home much better than anything else. So I would say a lot of it came by talking to people. A lot of it came to me by talking to customers, right? Um, and of course, when other entrepreneurs share the content in terms of what made them successful, it hits home because you want to leverage the best practices that other people have taken time to develop, right? And not you need not invent that by yourself. So that's definitely one source. Second is a lot of the content in terms of blogs and other publications has also helped me a lot. I'm a voracious reader as well, so every weekend I have to read at least 3 to 4 articles um, that I can use in my daily life. So that again has helped. Listening to a lot of podcasts also has helped. Big fan of Reid Hoffman's podcast. Um, Big fan of Thomas Tunge's writings. So those were, and then OpenView. OpenView is a community that publishes a lot about product-led growth. So consuming articles from there has also helped.
Do you have a favorite article or a favorite book?
Yeah, so uh, a lot of the writing has helped. Growth Hacking by Sean Ellis is something that I refer to. Sean Ellis is a great thinker. I know him personally. He's been phenomenal in inventing the term growth hacking that came out of his experiences at Dropbox. So I would definitely recommend that. And as I said, OpenView community has done a lot of work in terms of publishing good content on bottoms up model and product led growth. I've also contributed a couple of articles to that community, so that's again a good source. And then Thomas Tungas, who's with Redpoint, has done great job in talking about from an entrepreneur's perspective, how to scale, right? Reid Hoffman's book on blitzscaling is another book that's phenomenal. Ben Horowitz has published a couple of books that have been phenomenal as well.
Blitzscaling is a book that's been mentioned 3 times in the past like 3 days in this
Oh, wow.
podcast.
Yeah, no, I've really liked how Reid Hoffman paints a picture about different stages of a company growth and how at different stages of company growth you have to wear a different hat, bring in different perspective. And then you have to evolve, right? And sometimes you have to ask a tough question to yourself, can you scale the company to the next level? Or do you need people with new skill set to come in and help you take the company to the next level?
So you mentioned multiple times over talking to customers as a means of building the right features and choosing the right direction to take your company. How did you acquire those first customers and how did you grow your customer base over time?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of um, one of the statements that's out there in the internet, which is initial phases of a company, it has to be founder-led sales, right? And I say this um, because a lot of the companies are started by technologists who think about the product and the technology IP and and for them, sales is an afterthought, and they feel compelled to hire a professional salesperson to come in and sell the product. That I've seen causes a lot of problem, and it never works out well. As a founder, initially you're close to the problem. You have uh, done a deep dive in the problem front, and and thought about how to solve it, right? How do how do a user who's facing that problem gets benefit from that solution? And so you are in the position to best explain that to your customers. So that's the reason why the initial sales has to be done by the founders, and you then figure out what are the objections that you receive. How do you solve it? You start documenting that. So then, when you are ready to hire a professional salesperson, you can hand over these learnings to the professional salesperson, who can then take it to the next
Hmm.
level. So that's how I think about how do you acquire the customer. So in Strike Deck, pulled up my Rolodex, looked at my LinkedIn network, and went and spoke with a lot of guys, and also was open in asking for recommendations. Who else do you think I should be talking to? Have you seen anybody else who has a problem, like the one that I'm
Hmm.
describing? And you'll be surprised how many people just want to help, right? And like, I have never hesitated helping any entrepreneur or founder who's come to me,
Hmm.
because I know that starting a company is extremely, extremely tough, right? All the laws of nature are against you, and you have to work hard and survive. So help. And so in the valley, outside the valley, in the entrepreneurial community, every entrepreneur wants to help the other entrepreneur.
Hmm.
So um, so my advice to all the startup founders or all the entrepreneurs is that never feel shy of asking help, never feel ashamed to ask for help.
I like it. I was, if I'm just being honest, I feel like I was very egotistical about a year ago, only to realize that, oh, the further you go down the startup journey, the further you realize you know very little in comparison to the sum of all knowledge in the world. And there's a reason there's a lot of experts, just because there's a lot of things that require years to become experts in, and you just can't become an expert in everyone in everything.
Yeah, absolutely, David.
How do you know when you
Uh,
want to bring on specific leaders in your company to take certain directions to the next level? For example, like you can't be, I guess maybe some people are like amazing at both sales, marketing, product, customer, like I guess customer interviews, etc. At some point, you're limited on your time, and you want to, I guess, multiply yourself by hiring people, right? What was the point where you felt like I now know this is the right time to hire this role?
yeah, so when you start, the founders or the founding team are handling all the functions of a company, right?
Right.
And at certain stages of the company, certain functions are important. So, for example, initially, uh, product mindset is very important. Product focus is important. And then, as you start taking the concept to the market, you have to switch to sales mindset, right? And so when a time comes when you're not able to do justice to a function, and you will know it as a founder, you know it, right? Like, I'm there in the field, talking to prospects, making deals happen, and I'm needed on that front. I think bringing anybody, as I said, outside person to do the sales is not the right thing. I need to be there. But my time on the field is causing me not spending time on the product front. And that's when you think about bringing a professional who's well versed in that function
Hmm.
to take on that responsibility from you. But having said that, once you bring the other person, it's your duty to make sure that they are empowered. Not only they are empowered, but they also have all the uh, access to the information, right? They can benefit from your experience, so that then they have high chances of success.
So I think it works well when you're working with direct hires because you have the opportunity to interview them directly and you have the chance to pick their brains all the ways you'd like. And maybe even have like former work history with people. But how about all the scenarios where you now expect one of your team members to hire the next, like their team? Like, are you, how do you navigate that? Were you ever hesitant to let your team members hire other members without you being involved in the interview loop?
So when you hire people who are your direct reports, it's very important that you trust them to make the call. Um, Otherwise, it'll become an issue of micromanagement,
Right.
and I'm never a fan of micromanaging. And so when I brought in folks, I truly empowered them in terms of them making the call on what's right for the function that they are managing, right? Having said that, it's also important for founders to establish a culture of the organization. This is something that did not I did not do well in my earlier startups, but uh, I have learned the importance of establishing the culture early on over the years. And this is why I recommended Ben Horowitz's book on the culture, establishing the culture. I'll give you an example. If as a founder you are coming late to the meeting, then that becomes the culture of the organization. The next person you hire feels that it's okay to come late to the meeting, 5 minutes to the meeting, and then it percolates down. If you establish a culture saying that all our meetings should be about 40 minutes, it should not be 1 hour, it should be about 40 minutes. 40 minutes is the right time, is the right amount of time for not only a good discussion to happen, but also action items to emerge. Then that becomes a culture, right? And similarly, it's very important to establish what's your culture in terms of interviews, right? What's the methodology for the interviews, right? And how do you um, get the best candidate selected during the interview process? Google did a great job, phenomenal job. We all know, we've heard of their interview process, and they established this culture early on, and that's why they had the best talent in Google, and the culture still continues.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on what you feel like you wish you did better at in your previous startups? Because I think a lot of people view culture as an afterthought when the product is yet to be made. There's angry customers knocking the door. Like if entrepreneurs are juggling a lot of things, a lot of times I think culture is one of the things they let through the cracks.
Yeah, so I'll tell you this, I've made a lot of mistakes in my startups, got a lot of scars on my back. And that's why I'm now advising so many startups because I can help them, uh, in improving how they function and not to do the same mistakes that I did. Um, so I've done so many mistakes that I cannot even recall all of them. But
Okay.
uh, I will I will start with some of the things, right? Founders involved in the sales process. That was something that I started taking charge of from Strike Deck. Before that, when I did LeadFormix, I was not in the sales. I was not involved in the sales. I brought in an external person to do sales, right? So that's something that I learned from my mistake. Second is how do you go about the whole product iteration, right? Um, this is important because I have not seen any company that started with an idea pursue the same idea over the years. The idea has always evolved, right? That's why I swear by product iteration. You have to go with a mindset that I'm going to solve a problem. I have a thesis of an approach that will work for the problem, but that thesis could evolve. I should not be obstinate about the thesis. I should not be stubborn that this is the idea, this is my idea, and I'm going to stick with it. You have to be flexible to adapt, right? And again, a lot of it will be shaped by customers. A lot of it will be shaped by the market's feedback, right? So that's the other thing. Third, culture we talked. Yes, culture is something that I think 90% of the startups do not focus on. 90%, right? Though it's very valuable, but it's very important. Um, the other thing I would mention is that, which is again a recent thought that I've had, um, looking after your employees, not only in terms of work satisfaction, but in general, holistically, in terms of how they go about life, I think it's also important. Again, it's linked to culture a little bit, right? You want to emphasize diversity, you want to emphasize more inclusion, all of that. Um, but you also should be sensitive to what employees are feeling, and so very important to embrace that.
On the topic of culture, can you tell me about some of the things about StrikeDeck's culture that you are really proud of or things that you consider really important?
Yeah, so we used to swear by hustle mindset. Um, we used to say that we will hustle to get things done. And when you are in that hustle mindset, you have to think out of the box because that's the one that'll get you to the outcome that you want, right? And so um this also then later transformed into hustle to get customers what they want, right? This is where the customer obsession came about that I'm really proud about. At StrikeDeck, we were right from day one customer focused, customer obsessed, and it was initially with that mindset we said if we have to build throwaway code to get customers to a happy state, so be it, right? But the folks who are investing early on in StrikeDeck should be the happiest people out there, and we will do whatever it takes to build that. So really proud
Hmm.
about that culture. Even um, now within Medallia, what I tell my group is that think about yourself as a startup within a large company. Leverage whatever um, uh, the bigger organization provides, but still have that hustle mindset. That's preserve that culture, right? Let's be obsessed about what our customer wants, and let's try to get them whatever they need to be successful.
And what does it look like for you to create that culture? Because I think it's easy to like say things or write things down, but how do you embody it so that your team members can follow?
Yeah. So first of all, you have to lead by example, right? You'll have to demonstrate that this value is dear to your heart, and then you will do um, you'll do what it takes, right? So recently, as an example, we had a conference, and we had few of our customers speaking at the conference, and so I told my team that our customers are busy folks, and they are doing this because they want to work with us collaboratively, and so they are obliging us by participating in our conference. But let's figure out how do we make their life easier in terms of this activity. And so I was the first one to create PowerPoint decks on what could be talking points for our customers for the conference
Oh, that's
and
cool.
shared with the customers. And when our team saw the reaction, the positive reaction from the customers, they then started repeating this. So this is a small
Hmm.
example, but I think it showcases the philosophy that I talked about, right? So as a leader, you have to lead by demonstrating that you really care about this principle and how to go about it. And then the second is, I would say, rewarding people who follow that process. Uh, Not only the process, but also demonstrate the outcome from that process. So you then reward, then that gets amplified. So those are the,
What about
yeah.
what about the components of culture that take longer to measure in terms of like results? Sometimes sales cycle in the enterprise world can take 1 to 2 years, and it's really hard to reinforce that when people rotate between roles and jobs and locations frequently.
Yeah, you bring up a good point, David. Sometimes some results take long time to measure, and some results may need to be measured qualitatively. You cannot emphasize
Hmm.
quantitative all the time. Um, so, what I would recommend that while you have your eyes on the long-term result or the big impact, think about what are the smaller steps that lead to it and how you can figure out either a mini goal that measures that measures that step, right, and the direction that you are going. So then you can highlight that as something that you are achieving in the process of that bigger milestone, and you're making the right kind of progress.
In the interest of time, I have two more final questions. The second to last is, what's something that you wish you knew, call it five, like from the origin of Strike Deck 5 years ago? Like, what's something you know now that you wish you knew back then?
Yeah, so again, there are a lot of things that I wish I knew. Um,
Or worded differently, to entrepreneurs who may be following this podcast, what do you recommend they learn or focus on either in the early days or even before they form a company that you wish or that you've learned over recent
yeah,
years?
so I would say, fi- uh, finding the product market fit is really, really important, and following a structured process for that is really important. So
Hmm.
first think about the space that you're going after. Validate that space, right? Whether is it the right problem to go after? Is it a big, massive problem? Is it felt by a lot of people, right? Um, how do you, is the outcome from that problem, is the result from that, from solving that problem, is it big enough, right? So that is
Hmm.
important. You start with that. Once you have validated the idea, then your approach, right, becomes important. You have to figure out what's your thesis, what's your approach to solving that problem, and then you go about validating that, right? You validate that with your customers, you validate that with your potential investors, you validate that with potential partners. So you get that validated, right? And once you have a basic product that's being used, you know, go back to those users and get feedback saying how many of you guys um, can live without the product. And if 40% of your
Hmm.
users say that we cannot live without the product, then you can declare that you have got the product market fit, right? So I wish I knew
Gotcha.
more about that. Another thing that I wish I knew about is go-to-market fit. So once you have achieved your product market fit, then you have to do the almost the same exercise in terms of go-to-market fit, where you have to measure whether your content is resonating, your positioning is resonating, your pricing resonates, right? The channels that you want to go after, is that those are right channels. So it's about that as well that you should know.
Hmm.
Then um, in terms of, if your product market fit and go to market is doing well, then building pitch decks to go after the investors becomes very easy. So
Hmm.
figuring, that's why I am placing a lot of emphasis on product market fit and go to market fit. Um, Also, I would say that thinking about sales along with product development, thinking about the process, thinking about,
Hmm.
uh, while you're going about the founder-led sales journey, uh, documenting every step, documenting every information that comes your way. You're building the foundation for longer-term sales, for well-oiled
Gotcha.
sales machinery to take over.
Well, thank you for your time. I just wanted to finish on the same question I asked all of my guests. For all of our viewers who might want to get in touch with you, what's the best way they can do so?
Yeah, so feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Um, Basically, once they access my LinkedIn, they'll get my email as well. So that would be the best way to get in touch with me.